They've tested you today, didn't they? Someone crossed a line, disrespected your time, questioned your judgment, and you had a choice, fight or flight. If you fought, you probably won the battle, but lost something bigger. If you fled, you're probably replaying it right now, feeling that familiar burn of regret. Here's the truth, no one tells you. Both responses come from the same place of weakness. Both scream, I'm not sure of my worth. But there's a third option, the way of the immovable object, where people think twice before crossing you, not because they fear your anger, but because they recognize your unshakable core. This isn't about becoming a pushover or a tyrant. This is about becoming a force of nature that people naturally respect. Ready to discover the quiet power that changes everything? Subscribe to Darkwood Audiobooks and transform how the world sees you. There's a truth most men discover too late. The battles that destroy you aren't fought in boardrooms or barrooms. They're fought in the space between your ears. Every man who has ever stood for something knows this moment. The moment when silence becomes complicity, when keeping the peace becomes betraying yourself, when being agreeable becomes being invisible. You felt it, that slow burn in your chest when someone crosses a line you should have drawn years ago. The weight of swallowed words that turn to acid in your stomach. The exhaustion that comes from being everyone's doormat while pretending it's kindness. This isn't about you being weak. This is about you being untrained. The invasion, your mind is a fortress. But most men leave the gates wide open, inviting every opinion, every demand, every manipulation to set up camp inside their heads. They mistake this openness for strength. They call it being flexible or understanding or mature. It's none of those things. It's surrender without a fight. When you allow other people's emotions to dictate your actions, you're no longer living your life. You're performing in theirs. When you say yes to everything, you're saying no to yourself. When you avoid all conflict, you're choosing the slow death of irrelevance over the quick birth of respect. The fortress isn't built to keep everyone out. It's built to decide who gets in, and on what terms. The architecture of boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls. Walls keep everything out. Boundaries are gates with guards who know the difference between a guest and an invader. Most men think boundaries are about saying no. They're not. They're about meaning yes. When you say yes to something that violates your core values, your yes means nothing. It becomes a sound you make to avoid discomfort, not a commitment you make from strength. The man who can't say, he knows nothing valuable to offer when he says yes. Think about the men you truly respect. Not the ones you fear or envy, but the ones you genuinely respect. They all share one quality, predictability, not boring predictability, but the kind that comes from having principles they won't compromise. You know where they stand because they know where they stand. This isn't about being rigid, it's about being reliable, to yourself first, then to others. The cost of peace at any price. There's a man in your office who takes credit for your work. You say nothing because you don't want to cause drama. There's a friend who only calls when he needs something. You answer every time because you value the relationship. There's a family member who treats you like an emotional punching bag. You endure it because that's what good people do. You're not keeping the peace. You're funding the war against yourself. Every time you choose false harmony over authentic boundaries, you teach people that your respect is negotiable. You train them to see you as a resource to be used, rather than a person to be valued. You become the path of least resistance, and resistance is the only thing that builds strength. The cost of avoiding small conflicts is guaranteeing larger ones. The price of temporary peace is permanent resentment. The bill for being everyone's friend is being nobody's priority. The weight of silence. Silence has two faces. One builds respect, the other builds contempt. The silence of the strong man comes from choice. He speaks when his words add value, stays quiet when they don't. His silence carries weight because his words carry weight. When he finally speaks, people listen. The silence of the weak man comes from fear. He stays quiet to avoid confrontation, swallows his truth to keep others comfortable, chooses peace over authenticity. His silence carries no. Oh wait, because his words, when they finally come, carry no conviction. Which silence is yours? Most men think respect is something you win through force or lose through kindness. They're wrong on both counts. Respect is a language, and like any language, it has grammar, vocabulary, and rhythm. Most men are trying to have conversations in a language they never learned to speak. They're shouting in broken sentences, wondering why nobody understands them. The dialect of the desperate. Listen to how desperate men talk. Every statement is a question in disguise. Every opinion comes wrapped in apologies. Every request is buried under explanations nobody asked for. I know this might be wrong, but I was thinking maybe we could possibly... I hate to bother you, but if you have time and it's not too much trouble... I'm probably overreacting, but I feel like maybe. This isn't humility. This is linguistic submission. Every hedge word, every qualifier, every unnecessary apology is a signal that you don't believe your own thoughts are worth hearing. If you don't believe it, why should they? The language of respect doesn't apologize for existing. The grammar of authority. Authority isn't about volume, it's about certainty, not the fake certainty of the insecure man who shouts to hide his doubt, but the quiet certainty of the man who has done the work to know what he knows. Watch how respected men communicate. Their statements are statements, not questions disguised as statements. Their requests are clear, not buried under apologies. Their boundaries are presented as facts, not negotiations. I need this completed by Friday. Not, if possible, could you maybe try to have this done by Friday? No pressure, but I disagree. Not, I might be wrong, but I sort of feel like maybe there's another way to look at this. That doesn't work for me. Not, I hate to be difficult, but I'm not sure I can. The difference isn't rudeness versus politeness. The difference is clarity versus confusion. Respect flows toward clarity. The vocabulary of value. Every conversation is a negotiation, not for money or power, but for something more fundamental. Who sets the frame? The frame is the invisible context that determines how interaction unfolds. When you walk into a room, are you seeking approval or offering value? Are you asking for permission or taking responsibility? Are you reacting to their energy or generating your own? Most men live their entire lives inside other people's frames. They react instead of act. They respond to energy instead of creating it. They try to figure out what others want to hear instead of speaking what needs to be said. This is why nice guys finish last. Not because they're nice, but because they're frame followers. They let others set the rules of the game, then wonder why they never win. The respected man doesn't ignore other people's frames. He evaluates them. If they serve his values and goals, he'll work within them. If they don't, he'll create his own. But he never unconsciously adopts someone else's reality as his own. The rhythm of respect. Respect has a rhythm. It's not the frantic pace of the people-pleaser or the aggressive tempo of the bully. It's the steady rhythm of the man who has nowhere to be but where he is, nothing to prove but what he's already proven to himself. This rhythm shows up in how you speak. Short sentences when clarity matters. Longer ones when complexity serves. Pauses that let your words settle instead of rushing to fill every silence. A pace that suggests you have all the time in the world because your time has value. It shows up in how you move, not the hurried shuffle of the man trying to avoid attention or the exaggerated swagger of the man demanding it. The calm, purposeful movement of someone who belongs wherever he is. It shows up in how you respond, not the instant reaction that shows you're desperate to please or eager to fight, but the measured response that shows you're thinking before you speak, choosing your words instead of being chosen by your emotions. The paradox of presence. Here's what most men miss. The more present you are, the less you have to say. Presence fills space that words can't touch. The insecure man talks too much because he's afraid of silence. He fills every pause with explanations, every gap with apologies, every moment of uncertainty with nervous chatter. He mistakes noise for communication, volume for authority, constant talking for leadership. The secure man is comfortable with silence because his presence speaks for him. He doesn't need to fill every pause because his pauses have weight. He doesn't need to explain himself to everyone because his actions explain him to the people who matter. This doesn't mean being cold or distant. It means being intentional. Speaking when you have something to say, staying quiet when you don't. Letting your presence do the work that your words can't do. The economics of attention. Attention is currency, and like any currency, its value is determined by scarcity. The man who gives his attention to everything gives his attention to nothing. His approval means nothing because he approves of everything. His interest means nothing because he's interested in everything. His time means nothing because he gives it to everyone. The respected man is selective with his attention. Not because he thinks he's better than others, but because he knows that attention without discrimination is worthless. When he gives you his focus, it means something. When he offers his time, it's a gift, not an obligation. This selectivity isn't cruelty, it's honesty. It's the recognition that you can't serve everyone without serve it. No one. That you can't be everything to everyone without being nothing to yourself. The test of consistency. Respect isn't built on your best moments. It's built on your average ones. Anyone can be impressive for an hour, charming for an evening, principled for a crisis. The question is, who are you on a Tuesday afternoon when nobody's watching? The language of respect is spoken consistently, not just when it's convenient. Your boundaries don't disappear when you're tired. Your values don't change when you're stressed. Your standards don't lower when you're lonely. This is why respect takes time to build, but can be destroyed in a moment. Every interaction is either a deposit or a withdrawal from your credibility account. Most men make small withdrawals every day. A compromise here, a people-pleasing gesture there, a boundary crossed to avoid conflict, then wonder why they're overdrawn when they need respect most. The practice, learning the language of respect, starts with listening to yourself, not just your words, but the energy behind them. Are you speaking from confidence or insecurity, from value or neediness, from choice or compulsion? Record yourself in conversations, not to judge yourself harshly, but to hear what others hear. Notice the hedge words, the unnecessary apologies, the questions that should be statements. Notice when your voice goes up at the end of sentences that should go down. Notice when you're speaking to fill silence instead of to communicate truth. Then practice. Not grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but small adjustments. Replace I think, maybe, possibly with I believe. Replace I'm sorry to bother you with I have a question. Replace if you don't mind with I need. The language of respect isn't learned overnight, but every conversation is an opportunity to practice. Every interaction is a chance to speak from your center instead of your fear. Start speaking the language. The world is waiting to understand you. Power has two expressions, the desperate kind that announces itself and the authentic kind that simply is. Every man has encountered both. The first tries to convince you it's powerful through noise, posturing, and performance. It demands recognition, craves validation, needs witnesses. It's exhausting to watch and impossible to respect. The second doesn't try to convince you of anything. It doesn't need to. Its presence is its proof. It operates from stillness, not chaos, from certainty, not insecurity, from choice, not compulsion. Most men spend their lives learning the wrong kind of power. They study the tyrants instead of the leaders, the bullies instead of the warriors, the performers instead of the authentic. They mistake volume for authority, aggression for strength, control over others for control over themselves. The tyranny of noise. We live in the age of the loudest voice wins. Social media rewards the most extreme opinions. Politics celebrates the most dramatic gestures. Business promotes the most aggressive self-advocates. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, so everyone starts squeaking. This creates a world full of noise and empty of substance. Men learn to perform strength instead of building it. They practice appearing confident instead of becoming confident. They master the art of seeming powerful while remaining fundamentally powerless. The problem with performed power is that it requires constant maintenance. Every day you have to prove yourself again. Every conversation becomes a test you might fail. Every interaction requires you to establish dominance or risk losing it. It's exhausting, unsustainable, and ultimately empty. Real power doesn't require maintenance. It requires development. Once built, it sustains itself. Once earned, it compounds. Once embodied, it becomes as natural as breathing. The economy of energy. Every man has finite energy. The question is how you spend it. The loud man spends his energy trying to convince others he's powerful. He argues with everyone who disagrees, fights every battle offered to him, reacts to every provocation. He mistakes activity for accomplishment, engagement for achievement. By the end of the day, he's exhausted and has accomplished nothing that matters. The quiet man spends his energy building actual power. He chooses his battles carefully, invests in long-term development over short-term victories, responds only to what deserves his attention. He mistakes nothing for something else because he's clear about what matters and what doesn't. This isn't about being passive, it's about being strategic. The samurai doesn't draw his sword unless he intends to use it, not because he's afraid to fight, but because he understands that the threat of the blade is often more powerful than the blade itself. The paradox of availability: the more available you are, the less valuable you become. This applies to your time, attention, opinions, and energy. Most men make themselves too available. They answer every call immediately, respond to every text within minutes, agree to every request for their time. They think this makes them helpful, reliable, valuable. Instead, it makes them common. Scarcity creates value. Not artificial scarcity designed to manipulate, but natural scarcity that comes from having standards. When your time is limited, people value it more. When your attention is selective, it carries more weight. When your availability is conditional, your presence becomes more meaningful. The quiet man isn't playing games with his availability. He's protecting his resources so he can deploy them where they matter most. He says no to the trivial so he can say yes to the important. He guards his energy so he has it when it counts. The strength of silence. Silence is not the absence of communication, it's a form of communication, and in a world full of noise, it's often the most powerful form. When everyone else is talking, the man who listens controls the conversation. He gathers information while others give it away. He understands the room while others perform for it. He makes strategic decisions while others make reactive ones. When everyone else is arguing, the man who stays calm holds the power. His silence forces others to fill the space, often revealing more than they intended. His stillness makes their chaos look foolish by contrast. His restraint makes their reactions look desperate. When everyone else is trying to prove themselves, the man who has nothing to prove has already won. His confidence doesn't need validation. His strength doesn't need demonstration. His value doesn't need advertisement. This is not the silence of the weak man who's afraid to speak. This is the silence of the strong man who chooses when to speak. The difference is intention. One comes from fear, the other from power. The geography of respect. Respect operates like geography. There are territories you control absolutely, territories you influence significantly, and territories that belong to others entirely. Most men waste energy trying to control territories that aren't theirs. They try to change people who don't want to change. They fight battles they can't win. They invest in outcomes they can't control. They exhaust themselves trying to manage other people's emotions, opinions, and decisions. The quiet man focuses on his own territory first. his thoughts, emotions, actions, responses. He builds strength in the areas he can control absolutely before trying to influence areas he can only affect partially. He becomes the master of his own domain before trying to expand his influence. This isn't selfishness, it's strategy. You can't give what you don't have. You can't lead others until you can lead yourself. You can't influence from a position of weakness. The architecture of influence. True influence isn't built through persuasion or manipulation. It's built through example and consistency. When you consistently demonstrate good judgment, people start seeking your opinion. When you consistently handle pressure with grace, people start looking to you for leadership. When you consistently maintain your principles under stress, people start trusting your character. This takes time. There are no shortcuts to authentic influence. You can't fake your way to respect or perform your way to authority. You have to earn it through repeated demonstrations of competence, character, and consistency. The loud man tries to shortcut this process through force of personality, manipulation, or intimidation. These tactics might work temporarily, but they don't create lasting influence. They create compliance without commitment, obedience without respect. The quiet man builds influence slowly but permanently. Each interaction is a demonstration of his character. Each decision is a deposit in his credibility account. Each challenge met with grace is evidence of his strength. The discipline of response. Power is not about controlling what happens to you. It's about controlling how you respond to what happens to you. Every day presents opportunities to react or respond. The reaction is immediate, emotional, automatic. It comes from your triggers, not your values. It's determined by the situation, not your principles. It gives your power away to whoever or whatever provoked it. The response is delayed, thoughtful, intentional. It comes from your center, not your surface. It's guided by your principles, not your emotions. It maintains your power regardless of the provocation. The quiet man has mastered the gap between stimulus and response. He doesn't react to every provocation because he understands that not every provocation deserves his energy. He chooses his responses based on his values, not his impulses. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or avoiding conflict. It means processing emotions internally before expressing them externally. It means choosing your battles instead of fighting all of them. It means responding from strength instead of reacting from weakness. The practice of presence, quiet power, is ultimately about presence, not the performed presence of the man trying to impress, but the natural presence of the man who's comfortable in his own skin. This presence comes from knowing who you are and being comfortable with it, from having done the work to understand your values, principles, and boundaries. From accepting your strengths without arrogance and your weaknesses without shame. When you're present, you don't need to perform. Your authenticity speaks louder than any act. Your stillness commands more attention than any gesture. Your silence carries more weight than any speech. Presence is developed through practice, meditation, reflection, solitude, time spent understanding yourself instead of trying to understand everyone else. Time spent building inner strength instead of projecting outer strength. Start small. Practice listening more in conversations. Practice pausing before responding to provocations. Practice saying no without elaborate explanations. Practice being comfortable with silence. Quiet power isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming centered. It's the power that comes from knowing yourself so well that you don't need others to validate your worth. It's the strength that comes from being so grounded in your own values that external pressure can't shake you. In a world full of noise, become the silence. In a sea of chaos, become the calm. In an age of performance, become authentically yourself. The world needs men who understand the difference between power and force, between strength and violence, between confidence and arrogance. The world needs quiet warriors who lead by example instead of intimidation, who influence through character instead of manipulation, who create respect through consistency instead of demanding it through force. Be that man. The world is waiting. Most men think boundaries are about keeping people out. They're not. They're about letting the right people in on the right terms. A man without boundaries is like a city without walls. He might call himself open and welcoming, but what he really is defenseless. Every invader is treated like a guest. Every demand is treated like a request. Every manipulation is treated like an opportunity to help. This isn't kindness. It's cowardice disguised as virtue. The mythology of the nice guy. Society sells men a lie. That having boundaries makes you selfish. That saying no makes you difficult. That protecting your own interests makes you cruel. We're taught that good men sacrifice themselves for others. That real strength means enduring mistreatment. That true virtue means being everyone's doormat. This mythology creates a generation of men who pride themselves on their availability, their agreeableness, their willingness to be used. They mistake their lack of boundaries for moral superiority. They confuse their inability to say no with generosity. But generosity without boundaries isn't generosity. It's just weakness with better marketing. The man who can't say no has nothing valuable to offer when he says yes. His agreement means nothing because it's given without choice. His help means nothing because it's given without discrimination. His time means nothing because it's available to everyone. The architecture of self-respect. Boundaries aren't arbitrary rules you impose on others. They're the architecture of self-respect. They define where you end and others begin. They establish what you will and won't accept, what you will and won't tolerate, what you will and won't participate in. Every man has core values, whether he's identified them or not. Boundaries are simply these values, expressed in practical terms. If you value honesty, you have boundary. Ease around deception. If you value respect, you have boundaries around mistreatment. If you value your time, you have boundaries around how it's used. Without boundaries, your values are just pretty words with no real-world application. You can talk about respecting yourself while letting others disrespect you. You can claim to value your time while giving it away to anyone who asks. You can say you're worth something while accepting treatment that says you're worth nothing. Boundaries turn your values from concepts into reality. The economics of energy. Your energy is finite. This isn't a limitation. It's a fact that makes your energy valuable. Like any valuable resource, it should be allocated strategically, not randomly. Most men operate like they have unlimited energy. They say yes to every request, engage in every argument, respond to every demand for their attention. They spread themselves so thin that they become ineffective at everything. The strategic man treats his energy like capital to be invested, not currency to be spent. He allocates it to people and situations that align with his values and goals. He says no to the trivial so he can say yes to the important. He refuses to be drained by activities that don't serve his mission. This isn't selfishness, it's stewardship. You can't serve others from an empty cup. You can't help people if you're exhausted. You can't be strong for others if you've depleted your own strength on meaningless battles. The spectrum of boundaries. Not all boundaries are created equal. They exist on a spectrum from soft to hard, from flexible to absolute. Understanding this spectrum is crucial to applying boundaries effectively. Soft boundaries are preferences that can be negotiated. I prefer not to work late on Fridays is a soft boundary. It communicates your preference while leaving room for discussion. These boundaries are appropriate for situations where flexibility serves your larger goals. Medium boundaries are principles that require strong justification to cross. I don't lend money to friends is a medium boundary. It's clear and firm, but there might be extreme circumstances where you'd make an exception. These boundaries protect important values while acknowledging that life is complex. Hard boundaries are absolute lines that cannot be crossed without consequences. I don't tolerate being yelled at is a hard boundary. There's no negotiation, no exception, no flexibility. Cross this line, and there are immediate consequences. Most men make the mistake of treating all boundaries the same way. They either make everything negotiable, no real boundaries, or make everything absolute, inflexible, and difficult to maintain. The strategic man uses different types of boundaries for different situations. The communication of limits, how you communicate boundaries, is as important as having them. Poor communication can turn reasonable boundaries into relationship-destroying ultimatums. Good communication can turn boundaries into relationship-strengthening clarity. The weak man communicates boundaries apologetically. I'm sorry, but I can't work this weekend. I know, it's inconvenient and I feel terrible about it, but I have family plans that I really can't change. I hope you understand. The aggressive man communicates boundaries demandingly. I don't work weekends. Period. Figure it out yourself. The strategic man communicates boundaries clearly and without apology. I'm not available to work this weekend. I can tackle this first thing Monday morning, or we can discuss alternatives. Notice the differences. No apology for having the boundary. No elaborate explanation of why the boundary exists. No emotional language that invites argument. Clear statement of the limit. Offer of alternatives when appropriate. The paradox of respect. Here's what most men don't understand. People respect you more when you have boundaries, not less. Clear limits make relationships easier, not harder. Knowing what you will and won't accept eliminates guesswork and prevents misunderstandings. When you have no boundaries, people have to constantly test to find your limits. This creates tension and conflict. When your boundaries are clear and consistent, people know how to interact with you successfully. This creates respect and trust. Think about the people you most respect in your life. Do they have clear boundaries? Do they say no when something doesn't work for them? Do they maintain their standards even when it's inconvenient? Of course they do. That's part of why you respect them. Now think about the people you respect least. Do they agree to everything? Do they never say no? Do they allow themselves to be mistreated? Probably. That's part of why you don't respect them. Others will judge you the same way. Boundaries don't create distance. They create respect. They don't push people away. They attract the right people and repel the wrong ones. The maintenance of limits, setting boundaries, is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing practice that requires vigilance and consistency. Boundaries that aren't maintained become suggestions. Limits that aren't enforced become meaningless. This maintenance isn't about being rigid or inflexible. It's about being reliable. When people know your boundaries won't change based on your mood, their pressure, or the convenience of the moment, they stop testing them and start respecting them. Maintenance means consistently enforcing consequences when boundaries are violated, not making exceptions just to avoid conflict, regularly evaluating whether your boundaries still serve your values, adjusting boundaries when your life circumstances change, communicating changes clearly and early, the evolution of boundaries. As you grow stronger and more confident, your boundaries will evolve. What you once tolerated, you'll no longer accept. What once seemed like reasonable requests, you'll recognize as manipulative demands. What you once saw as helping others, you'll understand as enabling their dysfunction. This evolution is healthy and necessary. It's not about becoming harsh or uncaring. It's about becoming clearer about your values and more skillful at protecting them. Some people in your life won't like your evolving boundaries. They benefited from your old patterns and will resist your new ones. They might accuse you of changing, of becoming selfish, of not being the person they knew. They're right. You are changing. You're becoming the person you were meant to be instead of the person others wanted you to be. This is growth, not betrayal. The practice begins now. Start small. Don't try to revolutionize every relationship simultaneously. Pick one area where you've been too accommodating and establish a clear boundary. Maybe it's not checking work email after a certain time. Maybe it's not lending money to irresponsible people. Maybe it's not engaging in gossip or drama. Maybe it's not tolerating interruptions during your focused work time. Choose one boundary that aligns with your values and serves your goals. Communicate it clearly. Maintain it consistently. Learn from the experience. As this boundary becomes natural and automatic, add another. Build your boundary system methodically and intentionally. Each successful boundary makes the next one easier to establish and maintain. Remember, boundaries aren't about controlling others. They're about controlling your own participation in relationships and situations. You can't make people respect your boundaries, but you can choose how you respond when they don't. The goal isn't to build walls around yourself. It's to build gates with guards who know your values and serve your mission. It's to create space for the relationships and activities that matter while filtering out those that don't. You deserve to be treated with respect, but respect starts with respecting yourself, and respecting yourself starts with having boundaries that honor your values and protect your energy. The world will test those boundaries. Let it. Every test passed makes you stronger. Every limit maintained builds respect. Every boundary honored moves you closer to the life you actually want to live. Respect is alchemy. You can't manufacture it, demand it, or perform your way to it, but you can create the conditions where it naturally forms. Most men approach respect backwards. They try to get it instead of giving it. They focus on how others see them instead of how they see themselves. They perform strength instead of building it. They mistake fear for respect, compliance for admiration, attention for authority. Real respect operates on different principles entirely. The mirror effect. Respect is a mirror. What you give is what you get. Not immediately, not from everyone, but eventually from the people who matter. The man who treats others with genuine respect, not the performative kind that seeks reward, but the authentic kind that recognizes shared humanity, creates an environment where respect can grow. He models the behavior he wants to see. He sets the standard for how people interact in his presence. This doesn't mean being a pushover. Respect includes respecting yourself. It means having boundaries that honor your values while honoring others' humanity. It means disagreeing without being disagreeable. It means standing firm without standing over others. Watch how respected men handle disrespect. They don't ignore it, but they don't escalate it either. They address it calmly, clearly, and with dignity intact. They correct the behavior without attacking the person. They maintain their standards without lowering themselves to others' standards. The compound interest of character. Character builds like compound interest. Every small choice you make either deposits into or withdraws from your character account. Every moment of integrity, every instance of keeping your word, every time you do the right thing when no one's watching. These accumulate over time into a reputation that opens doors and creates opportunities. Most men underestimate this compound effect. They think character is about big moments, grand gestures, dramatic stands, but character is built in small moments when no one's looking. It's built in the decision to keep your word when it's inconvenient. It's built in the choice to tell the truth when a lie would be easier. It's built in the commitment to your values when external pressure suggests you compromise them. This compound effect works in reverse too. Every small compromise, every minor betrayal of your own values, every time you choose convenience over character, these also accumulate. They erode your self-respect and others' respect for you. They create a reputation for unreliability that becomes increasingly difficult to overcome. The man who understands this invests in his character like others invest in their retirement. Small, consistent deposits that seem insignificant in the moment, but create massive returns over time. The currency of consistency. Consistency is the currency of respect, not perfection. Perfection is inhuman and therefore untrustworthy. But consistency in your core principles, your fundamental values, your basic standards of behavior. People respect predictability in character. They want to know who you are on your worst day, not just your best. They want to see how you handle pressure, disappointment, criticism, success. They want evidence that your principles aren't just fair-weather friends that abandon you when things get difficult. This consistency shows up in small ways that create big impressions. Your word means something. When you say you'll do something, you do it. When you commit to being somewhere, you show up. When you make a promise, you keep it. Your standards don't fluctuate. You don't treat people differently based on what they can do for you. You don't compromise your values when it's convenient. You don't change your personality to fit different crowds. Your response to pressure is predictable. You don't panic when things go wrong. You don't become someone else when you're stressed. You don't abandon your principles when they're tested. The gravity of authenticity. Authenticity has gravity. It pulls people toward it without effort or manipulation. When you're genuinely comfortable with who you are, strengths, weaknesses, and everything in between, you create a magnetic field that attracts respect. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being real, about owning your flaws instead of hiding them, about acknowledging your limitations instead of pretending they don't exist. About being human instead of trying to be superhuman. Fake confidence repels people because it feels desperate. It's trying too hard, promising too much, performing instead of being. People can sense the effort behind the facade, and effort in authenticity signals that the authenticity isn't real. Real confidence is effortless because it's not dependent on external validation. It doesn't need to convince anyone of anything because it's not trying to convince itself of anything. It simply is what it is, without apology or explanation. The paradox of humility. True strength is humble because it has nothing to prove. False strength is arrogant because it has everything to prove. The strong man can admit when he's wrong because his identity isn't tied to being right. He can ask for help because his worth isn't dependent on being self-sufficient. He can acknowledge others' expertise because his value isn't threatened by their competence. The weak man can't admit error because his fragile ego can't handle being wrong. He can't ask for help because he needs to maintain the illusion of competence. He can't acknowledge others' strengths because he sees them as threats to his own value. This paradox confuses most men. They think humility makes them look weak, so they puff themselves up with false confidence. But false confidence always looks exactly like what it is: compensation for insecurity. And insecurity, no matter how well disguised, never commands genuine respect. Real humility is attractive because it signals strength. It says, I'm secure enough in my own worth that I don't need to diminish others to feel valuable. I'm confident enough in my abilities that I can acknowledge my limitations. I'm strong enough in my identity that I can admit when I'm wrong. The investment in others, respect, is created through investment, not extraction. When you invest in others' success, development, and well-being without keeping score, you create deposits in relationship accounts that pay dividends for years. This isn't about being a people pleaser or saying yes to everything. It's about being genuinely helpful when help is needed and appropriate. It's about sharing knowledge, making introductions, offering support during difficult times. It's about being the kind of person others are glad to know. Most men approach relationships transactionally. They help others only when they expect something in return. They invest only when they see immediate payoff. They give only when they're certain they'll receive. This transactional approach creates shallow relationships built on mutual usage rather than mutual respect. When the transaction ends, so does the relationship. When the benefit disappears, so does the connection. The strategic man invests in relationships without requiring immediate returns. He helps because he can, not because he has to. He gives because he has value to offer, not because he needs something in return. This creates deeper, more durable relationships that serve both parties over time. The magnetism of mission. Men who are respected are usually men who are going somewhere, not physically, but purposefully. They have a mission that's bigger than their immediate comfort, a vision that extends beyond their immediate needs. This mission creates natural respect because it demonstrates that you're not just drifting through life, waiting for things to happen to you. You're actively creating the life you want. You're building something, improving something, contributing something. The mission doesn't have to be grandiose. It can be mastering your craft, building a strong family, serving your community, developing a skill. What matters is that it's yours, that it means something to you, that you're actively pursuing it. People respect mission-driven men because mission implies standards. Standards imply boundaries. Boundaries imply self-respect. Self-respect creates the conditions where others' respect can grow. The practice of respect. Earning respect is a practice, not an event. It's developed through daily choices to honor your values even when it's difficult. It's built through consistent behavior that demonstrates your character even when no one's watching. Start with yourself. Treat yourself with the respect you want from others. Keep promises you make to yourself. Honor your own boundaries. Invest in your own development. Take care of your physical, mental, and emotional health. Then extend it outward. Treat others with genuine respect, not because they've earned it, but because you're the kind of person who gives it. Listen when people talk. Keep confidences when they're shared. Show up when you're needed. Be reliable in small things so you can be trusted with big things. Finally, maintain it consistently. Don't let stress, pressure, or convenience erode your standards. Don't become someone else when things get difficult. Don't compromise your values to avoid conflict or gain approval. Respect is both the foundation and the goal. It's how you stand up for yourself without creating enemies. It's how you maintain your integrity while building relationships. It's how you achieve your objectives while helping others achieve theirs. The alchemy of respect transforms ordinary interactions into extraordinary relationships. It turns conflicts into collaborations. It turns strangers into allies. It turns a man who's trying to prove his worth into a man whose worth is evident to anyone who meets him. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, but it begins with a single decision: to treat yourself and others with the respect that every human being deserves, regardless of whether they reciprocate. That decision, practiced consistently over time, becomes the foundation for a life built on mutual respect rather than mutual exploitation. In a world full of people trying to take respect by force, be the man who earns it through character. In a sea of performers trying to impress, be the authentic man who simply is. In an age of noise and drama, be the quiet strength that others can count on. The world needs more men who understand that respect isn't about dominance or submission. It's about recognition. Recognition of worth, value, dignity, and humanity. When you embody these qualities consistently, respect flows naturally toward you. And when you give these qualities consistently, you create the conditions where respect can flourish. In a world drowning in words, the man who has mastered silence holds infinite power. This isn't about becoming mute or antisocial. This is about understanding that silence and speech are tools, and like any tools, their power comes from knowing when and how to use them. Most men use words like ammunition, constantly firing, rarely hitting their target, always running out when they need them most. The strategic man treats words like precision instruments, each one chosen for maximum impact. Each silence calculated for optimal effect. Each conversation approached with the understanding that less is often more, that restraint often demonstrates more strength than expression. The addiction to explanation. Most men are addicted to explaining themselves. They feel compelled to justify every decision, defend every action, elaborate on every thought. They mistake explanation for communication, justification for clarity, more words for better understanding. This addiction stems from insecurity. The man who constantly explains himself doesn't trust that his actions speak for themselves. He doesn't believe his decisions are self-evidently correct. He needs external validation that his choices make sense. But explanation often achieves the opposite of its intention. Instead of creating understanding, it creates doubt. Instead of demonstrating confidence, it reveals insecurity. Instead of commanding respect, it invites criticism. I'm not going to the party because I'm tired and I have a lot going on this week and I don't really know most of the people there and honestly, I'm just not in the mood for being social right now. Versus, I'm not going to the party. The first response invites debate about each reason given. Is he really that tired? Are his other commitments really that important? Should he try to be more social? The explanation becomes a negotiate ion. The second response is complete in itself. It doesn't invite argument because it doesn't provide ammunition for argument. It's a decision, not a discussion starter. The currency of attention. Your attention is currency. And like any currency, its value is determined by scarcity. When you give your attention to everything, you give value to nothing. Most men give their attention away too freely. They respond immediately to every message, engage with every opinion, react to every provocation. They treat their attention like an infinite resource when it's actually their most finite and valuable asset. The strategic man is selective with his attention. Not because he thinks he's better than others, but because he understands that attention without discrimination is worthless. When he gives you his focus, it means something. When he engages with your ideas, you know he finds them worthy. When he responds to your communication, you understand it matters to him. This selectivity creates natural respect. People value what they can't easily get. They appreciate what isn't automatically given. They respect those who choose to engage, rather than those who can't help but engage. The power of the pause. Between stimulus and response lies your power. Most men react so quickly they skip right over their power and wonder why they feel powerless. The pause is where choice lives. It's the space where you decide whether to react from emotion or respond from principle. It's the moment where you choose whether to be controlled by external events or guided by internal values. In conversations, the pause serves multiple purposes. It gives you time to think before speaking, reducing the chance of saying something you'll regret. It creates space for the other person to elaborate, often revealing more than they intended. It demonstrates that you're comfortable with silence, which suggests confidence and self-control. It shows that you consider your words carefully, which makes them carry more weight when you do speak. The amateur conversationalist rushes to fill every silence. He's uncomfortable with pauses, so he babbles to avoid them. This makes his words seem desperate and his opinions seem unconsidered. The strategic conversationalist uses silence as punctuation. He lets important points sink in. He gives emotional statements time to land. He allows tension to build before resolving it. He understands that the spaces between words can be as powerful as the words themselves. The economics of emotional labor. Every conversation requires emotional labor. The question is, who's doing the work? In most interactions, insecure men do all the emotional labor. They work to keep the other person comfortable. They manage others' emotions while neglecting their own. They contort themselves to fit others' expectations while losing touch with their own needs. This creates an exhausting dynamic where you're constantly performing for others while never being yourself. You become skilled at reading rooms and managing moods, but lose the ability to simply be, present, and authentic. The confident man shares emotional labor appropriately. He takes responsibility for his own emotions, while allowing others to take responsibility for theirs. He contributes to the emotional climate of interactions without taking total responsibility for it. This balance creates healthier relationships and more genuine respect. People appreciate those who contribute to good interactions without trying to control them. They value those who are emotionally mature without being emotionally codependent. The art of strategic revelation. Information is power, and personal information is personal power. The man who tells everyone everything about himself has no mystery, no depth, no space for others to project their own curiosity and interest. This doesn't mean being secretive or manipulative, it means being intentional about what you share, when you share it, and with whom. It means understanding that revelation should serve relationship building, not just the need to be heard or understood. Most men either overshare or undershare. They either dump their entire life story on anyone who'll listen, or they remain so closed that no one can connect with them. Both extremes prevent the development of genuine relationships and authentic respect. Strategic revelation means sharing appropriately for the level of relationship. Casual acquaintances don't need to know your deepest struggles. Close friends deserve more depth than surface-level pleasantries. Professional relationships require different boundaries than personal ones. The key is reciprocity and appropriateness. Match the level of sharing to the level of relationship. Allow intimacy to develop gradually and naturally. Don't rush to the deep end with people who are still learning to swim in the shallow water of your acquaintance. The leadership of listening. In a world where everyone's fighting to be heard, the man who truly listens has an enormous advantage. He gathers information while others give it away. He understands perspectives while others just advocate for their own. He builds influence while others burn energy trying to prove their points. Most men listen only long enough to find their turn to talk. They're not processing what's being said. They're preparing their response. They're not seeking to understand. They're waiting to be understood. This creates conversations that are really just competing monologues. The strategic listener genuinely seeks to understand before seeking to be understood. He asks clarifying questions not to challenge but to comprehend. He reflects back what he's heard to ensure accuracy. He finds value in others' perspectives even when he disagrees with their conclusion. This creates several powerful effects. People feel heard and valued, which makes them more likely to listen when you do speak. You gather more complete information, which helps you make better decisions. You understand others' motivations and concerns, which helps you address them effectively. You demonstrate emotional intelligence and maturity, which naturally commands respect. The discipline of response. Every provocation is a test, not of your toughness or your willingness to fight, but of your self-control and strategic thinking. The man who responds to every provocation fails the test even if he wins the argument. Provocations come in many forms. Direct challenges to your competence or character, attempts to make you defensive about your choices, emotional manipulations designed to get reactions, gossip or criticism shared to create drama, pressure to compromise your values or boundaries. Your response to these provocations reveals your level of development. The undeveloped man reacts emotionally and immediately. The developed man responds strategically and appropriately. This doesn't mean never responding to challenges. It means responding from choice rather than compulsion. Some provocations deserve direct address. Others deserve strategic ignore. Some require firm boundaries. Others require gentle redirection. The key is maintaining your center regardless of external pressure. Your response should be determined by your values and objectives, not by the provocation itself. You should be responding to your own principles, not reacting to others' manipulations. The practice of selective speech. Begin developing this discipline today. Notice your patterns of speech and silence. Do you talk too much or too little? Do you explain yourself unnecessarily? Do you react immediately to provocations? Do you give your attention away too freely? Choose one pattern to adjust. If you tend to explain, practice giving shorter answers. If you tend to react quickly, practice pausing before responding. If you tend to engage with every argument, practice letting some provocations pass without response. Pay attention to the results. How do people respond when you speak less? What happens when you pause before reacting? How does selective engagement change the dynamic of your relationships? Remember, this isn't about becoming cold or unresponsive. It's about becoming intentional. It's about using your words and silence as tools to create the outcomes you want, rather than just releasing emotional pressure. The discipline of selective silence is ultimately about respect for yourself and others. When you respect your own words enough to choose them carefully, others respect them too. When you respect others enough to listen genuinely, they respect you for your attention. When you respect the power of communication enough to use it strategically, it serves your values and objectives instead of just your impulses. In conversations, be present. In conflicts, be centered. In provocations, be selective. In relationships, be genuine. In all interactions, be the man who understands that true power doesn't need to announce itself, because it's evident in every word spoken and every silence maintained. There comes a moment in every man's development when external validation becomes irrelevant, when other people's opinions lose their power over your decisions, when you become unshakable not because you're hard, but because you're grounded. This is the ultimate goal. To become so clear about who you are and what you stand for that external pressure becomes nothing more than weather. It might be uncomfortable, but it can't change your essential nature. It might require you to adjust your tactics, but it can't compromise your core. Most men never reach this point. They spend their lives being blown around by others' expectations, opinions, and demands. They shapeshift to fit different crowds, apologize for their authentic selves, compromise their values to avoid conflict. They become everything to everyone and nothing to themselves. The archaeology of self, building an unshakable core, begins with archaeological work. You have to dig through layers of conditioning, expectation, and social programming to find your authentic self underneath. Most men have buried this authentic self so deeply under others' expectations that they've forgotten it exists. This archaeology is uncomfortable work. You discover that many of your current beliefs aren't actually yours. They're inherited from family, absorbed from culture, adopted to fit in. Many of your current goals aren't actually yours. They're society's definitions of success projected onto your life. Many of your current fears aren't actually yours. They're learned responses to others' anxieties and insecurities. But underneath all this borrowed material is your actual self, your genuine values, interests, capabilities, and vision. The person you were before the world told you who you should be. The man you could become if you stopped trying to meet everyone else's expectations and started honoring your own. This excavation requires solitude, reflection, and honest self-examination. Time spent alone with your thoughts without distraction. Questions that go deeper than surface preferences. What do you actually value, not what you think you should value? What genuinely interests you, not what's supposed to interest you? What do you actually want from life, not what others want for you? The hierarchy of values. An unshakable core is built on a clear hierarchy of values. These aren't abstract concepts or borrowed principles, but deeply held beliefs about what matters most in life. Without this hierarchy, every decision becomes a struggle between competing goods. Every choice becomes agony. Every conflict becomes internal warfare. Most men have never done the work to clarify their values hierarchy. They know they value family, career, health, relationships, personal growth, but they've never determined what happens when these values conflict. What do you choose when family time conflicts with career advancement? When personal growth requires uncomfortable truths that might damage relationships? When health requires changes that affect your social life? The unshakable man has thought through these conflicts in advance. He's determined what matters most when everything matters. He's made peace with the trade-offs that values-based living requires. He's accepted that you can't optimize for everything simultaneously. This clarity eliminates most internal conflict. When a situation arises that challenges your values, you don't have to agonize over the decision. You simply apply your predetermined hierarchy. This doesn't make the choices easy, but it makes them clear. The immunity to manipulation. Manipulation works by exploiting uncertainty, insecurity, and unclear boundaries. The man who knows himself completely becomes naturally immune to most forms of manipulation because manipulators have nothing to exploit. Guilt manipulation doesn't work on someone who's clear about their responsibilities and limitations. You can't guilt someone into doing something they've already decided doesn't align with their values. You can't make someone feel bad about boundaries they've established through careful consideration. Fear manipulation doesn't work on someone who's made peace with uncertainty and developed confidence in their ability to handle challenges. You can't scare someone into compliance when they've already accepted that life involves risk and they're prepared to handle consequences. Social manipulation doesn't work on someone who's not dependent on others' approval for self-worth. You can't threaten someone with social rejection when their sense of value comes from internal sources rather than external validation. This immunity isn't about becoming cold or disconnected from others. It's about becoming so secure in your own worth that you don't need others to validate it. So clear about your own path that you don't need others to approve it. So confident in your own judgment that you don't need others to confirm it. The physics of pressure. External pressure follows predictable patterns. Understanding these patterns helps you respond strategically rather than reactively. Pressure often increases just before it breaks. When people realize their usual influence tactics aren't working on you, they often escalate before giving up. They'll try guilt, anger, threats, bribes, social pressure, whatever they think might break your resolve. This escalation is actually a sign that your boundaries are working. The pressure increases because your previous compliance-trained people to expect it. When you change the pattern, they initially try harder to restore the old pattern before accepting the new one. Knowing this helps you stay steady during the storm. The increased pressure doesn't mean you should give in. It means you're close to establishing a new equilibrium where your boundaries are respected rather than tested. The compound effect of consistency. Every time you honor your values despite external pressure, you strengthen your core. Every time you maintain your boundaries when they're tested, you build respect. Every time you choose principle over popularity, you increase your capacity for both. This compound effect works slowly but powerfully. Each individual instance might seem small, but they accumulate into an unshakable foundation. The man who consistently chooses his values over others' expectations develops a reputation for integrity that opens doors and creates opportunities. This consistency also builds internal strength. Each time you prove to yourself that you can maintain your standards under pressure, you increase your confidence in your ability to handle future pressure. You build evidence that you're the kind of person who does what he says he'll do, believes what he says he believes, values what he says he values. When you become unshakable in your authentic self, you develop natural magnetism, not the performed charisma of someone trying to impress, but the genuine appeal of someone comfortable in their own skin. This magnetism attracts the right people and repels the wrong ones. People who value authenticity are drawn to your genuineness. People who prefer manipulation and control find you uninteresting because you can't be manipulated or controlled. This natural selection improves your relationships. Instead of attracting people who want it to use you, you attract people who want to know you. Instead of drawing those who need you to be someone else, you draw those who appreciate who you actually are. The emergence of natural authority. When you become truly unshakable in your core self, authority emerges naturally, not the forced authority of someone trying to dominate others, but the organic authority of someone who's mastered himself. People naturally look to those who seem to know where they're going, especially when they're not sure of their own direction. This authority doesn't need to be claimed or defended because it's evident in how you move through the world. Your decisions are clear because your values are clear. Your responses are measured because your center is stable. Your presence is calm because your inner world is ordered. Others sense this and respond accordingly. They seek your opinion not because you demand to be heard, but because your perspective has proven valuable. They follow your lead not because you insist on leading, but because your leadership serves their interests as well as your own. The ultimate stand, standing up for yourself without creating enemies, ultimately requires standing up as yourself, not as who others want you to be, not as who you think you should be, but as who you actually are at your core. This is the ultimate stand, the decision to be authentic regardless of consequences, to honor your values regardless of pressure, to maintain your integrity regardless of cost, to remain yourself regardless of who wants you to be someone else. This stand doesn't create enemies because it doesn't attack anyone. It simply establishes who you are and what you represent. Those who can respect authenticity will respect you. Those who require you to be inauthentic to accept you were never really accepting you anyway. When you make this stand, you discover something profound. Most of the conflicts you've been having weren't about external issues at all. They were about internal conflicts between your authentic self and your performed self. When you resolve this internal conflict by choosing authenticity, most external conflicts resolve themselves. The unshakable core isn't built overnight. It's developed through years of small choices to honor your authentic self over your performed self. It's strengthened through consistent decisions to choose principle over convenience, character over comfort, integrity over approval. But once built, it becomes your greatest asset. It makes you immune to manipulation, resistant to pressure, and naturally magnetic to others. It allows you to stand up for yourself without aggression, maintain your boundaries without creating enemies, and lead others while serving something greater than yourself. In a world full of men trying to be someone else, dare to be yourself. In a sea of performers seeking applause, be the authentic man seeking truth. In an age of noise and confusion, be the quiet strength that others can count on. Your unshakable core is not just your foundation, it's your gift to the world. Use it wisely,